Fake health news is something that goes around a lot. There's a lot of people, particularly on TikTok, who give out absolute nonsense information that they completely pull from their nether region based on the idea that they want to sell you something. Don't do this thing that we've already known is really, really healthy, and instead buy my shit. That's a pretty common thing. And there are some people who are real medical professionals who dedicate themselves to answering stuff like this and reminding people that it's complete nonsense. Things like raw milk. There is a reason why for hundreds, if not thousands of years, we have been pasteurizing cow's milk. There's a reason for that, because raw milk will kill you. I personally know a nurse who gets, in the US, who gets at least one person a week who now has permanent health problems as a result of drinking raw milk. A week. Because people don't listen. Now, I do want to talk about one that is a little bit more complicated, because the jury is still actually out on it. The research has not fully conclusively said one way or another. Now, many of you probably know that I am in university for psychology, mostly with a special emphasis on clinical psychology and schizophrenia. So I am not a doctor. I'm not claiming to be a doctor, but I do have some education in this field. One of the pieces of advice that are going around is called dopamine fasting. And basically, you do a bunch of stuff to have less dopamine in your brain, and it helps you do some kind of a reset, and then helps you. First of all, one of the main problems is that there is more than one definition of what dopamine fasting is. So that's kind of an issue right there. Some of it is outright pseudoscientific nonsense. Some of it is relatively on the right track, but not 100% proven to have the efficacy that it claims. Here's the thing. Most of the excitation in your brain happens as a result of two neurotransmitters, that being glutamate and dopamine. Dopamine is one of the neurotransmitters that's targeted specifically for mental illnesses with regards to depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, psychosis, etc. Basically, it's like the reward chemical in your brain. And that's linked to, not only pleasure, but how your brain functions in terms of reward, especially with regards to addiction, etc. So the general theory, without going into the more specific ones, is that if you deprive your brain of this to some degree, because what degree depends on which, health guru you're talking to, is beneficial. There is some truth to this. Obviously, if you are overstimulated and then you remove that overstimulation, your brain will eventually try to get back to homeostasis. So the general principle of this is basically correct. The problem arises in the more specific claims that are being made. For example, because my particular area is schizophrenia, dopamine plays, as the dopamine schizophrenia hypothesis goes, and I tend to believe it given the research that has been carried out, that dopamine plays a very large role in schizophrenia, as does much of the stimulation, that being that there are four major dopaminergic pathways in the brain: the mesocortical, the mesolimbic, the turboinfundibular, and the nigrostriatal pathways in the brain. The mesolimbic is the one that, if there is too much dopamine activity, it causes schizophrenia. While in the others, if there is not enough, there is many symptoms like Parkinsonism, not to be confused with Parkinson's disease. Parkinsonism is having the symptoms of Parkinson's without actually having the actual disease. And that arises from not having enough dopamine in your system, akathisia, tardive dyskinesia, and all the other related, problems that you can have if you do not have enough dopamine in the other 4 dopaminergic pathways in the brain. Now, obviously there is much overstimulation with modern society, particularly with connection to social media, etc. TikTok being probably one of the worst examples because it requires the absolute minimal amount of attention possible. You flip, 10, 15 second long videos. And that's really all you get. That's all you need. And that can be very addictive, which is why they have the whole thing in there. Give your thumbs a break. And it reminds you that maybe you should slow down, go to sleep, take a break, go do something else, etc. Thing is, one of the problems with dopamine, and this particularly relates to schizophrenia, is the fact the one area, the mesolimbic area, needs less stimulation in order to avoid health problems, while the other 4 require more in order to avoid health problems. And this is one of the reasons why there is so much difficulty in treating schizophrenia, because you take medication to reduce the positive symptoms, delusions, paranoia, hallucinations, etc. in the mesolimbic system, but it also reduces it in the other areas which produce the metabolic problems, the akathisia, tardive dyskinesia, etc. So the thing is, if you do deprive your brain of too much, you're going to have motor skill problems. You are going to have that. See, the thing is, how far do you actually push it? Because it's one of those things where you could push it really, really far in your particular case, but in another person's case, they couldn't do it. They couldn't push it that far, or they're going to have motor skill and other side effects. It's really one of those things where you really should talk, if you're concerned about a real problem, talk to an actual medical professional and get their advice so that they can tailor something towards you and your particular situation, because not everybody's body is the same. Like, there's people who can take a medication and the medication does the exact opposite of what it was intended to do and what it does in other people. The thing about medical advice is that it really has to be taken from someone who knows what they're talking about. And that's what I'm telling you. Go talk to someone who is a medical professional to get real advice. Don't get it from some YouTube guru. Now, I'm not necessarily giving you advice on what to do with your health. I'm telling you to talk to a professional who does 100% know what they're talking about and can suggest something specifically for your case and your system, etc. Because obviously, on a very superficial level, there is always some benefit to withdrawing from social media. Aside from, depending on who you are, it can cause a great deal of stress. For someone like me, disengaging from it is a good idea, given how many times someone says they're going to kill me, or etc., or calls me names, or harasses me, or doxes me, etc. But it should also be noted that sometimes deliberately getting less dopamine is a good idea, particularly if you have anorexia nervosa, or in layman's terms, just anorexia. When you refuse to eat, as someone with anorexia nervosa does, the body produces more dopamine because it's trying to make you hungry. It's trying to get you to eat because you're not eating. And it is not unheard of for this increase in dopamine that your body puts out in order to get you to eat because you're starving to end up causing psychosis. So people end up having psychotic episodes, primarily women, as a result of not eating. So if you kind of were in that case, then it would make sense, at least superficially, to get less dopamine. I would say it's probably more important to deal with the anorexia nervosa. But again, reducing dopamine would be helpful. But again, go to a medical professional and get that looked at and something tailored to your specific biology. So while there is discussion on whether or not, a dopamine detox is good for you, it can be, but it also could not be depending on your situation. The problem with the health gurus on YouTube is that they just will say whatever they can to sound popular, to become popular, or to maintain popularity, or to sell you something. So one last piece of advice. Anyone who is trying to get you to do something health-wise and then has something to sell you to achieve that goal, automatically be skeptical of that person. Don't just automatically assume that because they said big pharma did something that they're automatically right. See, here's the thing. Just because one side is right, just because one side is incorrect, that does not make the opposite automatically correct. Just because the mainstream media does not like a particular political candidate, that does not automatically make them a good thing. They could be a good thing, or they could be a bad thing. As with the case of Trump, just because the mainstream political establishment does not like Trump, that doesn't necessarily mean he's a good thing. Because he is still incompetent and a danger to the system, even though the system doesn't like him. So it's kind of a non sequitur to assume that just because something you don't approve of doesn't like it, doesn't make it correct. And that this would be the opposite of science. This would be automatically believing something. Okay. You get what I'm trying to say. So no matter what, if you feel that there's too much stimulation in your life, too much social media, too much this or that, by all means, withdraw from social media and that kind of stimulation, because it may not necessarily be dopamine itself. It should, however, note that one way to raise your dopamine is to exercise. And basically, exercise cannot give you too much dopamine that is going to hurt you, unless you already have some kind of medical condition where you would have an extreme overabundance anyway, but that is extremely rare. So really, in terms of health advice, eat a balanced diet, exercise, take care of your mental health, disengage when it would be useful, and follow general guidelines. And if you're going to make any real significant changes other than that, please consult a doctor, because they are the ones who know what they're talking about, the ones who can actually help you, and the ones that can tailor stuff specifically for your health concerns. Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.